this Tuesday, August 20th, 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, for the Schaedler podcast, where we will discuss real estate-related matters and the new lives for buyers and sellers in the real estate world. See you Tuesday. Hey guys, Philipp Schaedler here, and thank you so much for joining me on my August podcast about real estate. I do my monthly podcast every third Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So I want to make this as brief as possible. I know everybody's always in a hurry, and let's get started right away. So let's look at the agenda, what we're going to talk about today. So first of all, mortgage rates. Let me just have a look here. If they updated, so 30-year fixed is at 6.5, FHA is 6.53, and 0.5 is 30-year FHA. So it's still, the prices are high, the rates are still considerably high. I think if you have a mortgage broker, I think it's much better than just dealing with one lender, because a mortgage broker has different avenues to different connections to different lenders, where a lending company like Bank of America, whatever, or any bank, will just have one source. So I would definitely do shopping around. And I know two good mortgage brokers. One is Kat Whitman, and she's done my mortgage, my property, and then also Ron Glasser, which, by the way, I will have as a guest next month. We'll talk about mortgage-related issues, right? Let's look what else we have on the agenda here. Yes, we're going to talk about the NAR lawsuit update, the settlement. There is a lot of confusion going on. The dust is still settling, and anyway, there's a lot to talk about. But what I did find out is, because up until in the beginning, it was told that even online searches need to be deleted unless I have a BRBC form signed, and I'm going to tell you in a minute what the BRBC form is. But the good news is, for my buyer clients, Adrian, David, Marianne, Sibeli, Mick, Asmi, Marianne, and Amy, I do not have to delete the online searches, because these clients are looking for properties online, and so that can stay in place. The BRBC is a buyer representation broker compensation form, which looks something like this. And of course, as most forms, they're very intimidating, they're not fun. But what this form is for, it has actually a benefit too. So every situation has an upside and downside, right? So there's more paperwork for us with this settlement, definitely. So this is the form we would have to agree on signing. This form is important because up until now, sometimes people signed a BRBC form, and sometimes they didn't, but now they have to. In order to show a property, to tour a property, you must have that in place. So the way it would work is, let's just say, for example, you're the buyer, I'm your agent, we agree on a commission, and let's just say, for example, the commission is, let's say, 2.5%, right, to represent you in the purchase of that home. Now, the seller may offer some compensations. The lawsuit, what the lawsuit was about, is that some sellers in the past, some lawyers found some sellers who claim that they were not aware that they're paying a buyer compensation, right? Even though, in the RLA, the residential listing agreement, it clearly states, the commission, the total commission, and then traditionally, the commission will be divvied up. Half goes to the buyer side, so 5%, 2.5 goes to the seller agent, and 2.5 goes to the buyer agent. Well, people say that they were not aware of this. This is what the lawsuit is all about. So as a result of this, as a result of the settlement, on the MLS, we can no longer point out or show what the compensation, if any, the seller is offering, right? So, and one of the reasons is, and this may be true in the past, that there was steering. So what that means is, let's say there's an agent that looks for you. Let's say they find 10 properties for you because you're looking to buy a property, and one of them shows that the seller compensation to the buyer agent is 2%, right? So they may, and the other ones are 2.5 and 3%. So they may just omit that property in the search, which, yes, is not correct. That's unethical. It's not supposed to be that way. So that would be called steering, right? But what has happened now is, and I have one of those clients, I have a client who looks searching in the $800,000 range here in Los Angeles for a condominium. And I told her that she may have to pay my fee out of pocket, but she doesn't want to. So I asked her, I said, well, do you want me to just show your properties where the seller is paying a compensation and leave the other ones out? And she said, yes, I don't want to pay for it. So now the steering has kind of been put over to the client in a way, right? So it's kind of I don't know if this is the end of all of this whole situation. There might be some adjustments too. But anyway, so let's go back to the situation of what happens if we don't have a buyer-broker agreement. But if we don't have one, I get fined. So in other words, before touring a home with a buyer, you have to have a BRBC signed, executed, and must be in place and uploaded. Otherwise, I will get a fine of $2,500 from the MLS and possibly go to MLS jail, which means I lose access to the MLS for a certain amount of time, right? We're also going to talk about current housing inventory and homeowner safety tips. And then, like I said earlier, next month, we'll have Ron Glasser from Mac Mortgage. And I have an interesting question to ask him about this issue. Because as it stands right now, in my opinion, VA buyers and FHA buyers are basically eliminated right now because Veterans Administration, you may not notice, do not need a down payment to purchase a property. This is in gratitude for their service that they have given to us fighting for our freedom, right? That's the least thing I think we can do for them. So, but they're usually not flush with money. So if they have to pay now on $1 million house, 30,000, 3% would be 30,000 or 15 or whatever the fee is you negotiated. They don't have that out-of-pocket money, so they're limited. FHA, very similar. They have a down payment requirement of 3.5%, so it's very low, right? And they probably don't have that extra money laying around either, right? So my question to Ron and all the lenders would be that would the lender consider incorporating the buyer's agent compensation fee into the mortgage or like as a second mortgage, right? Because that would get things moving again, but I think they don't do that, and I would like to find out why when he comes on. That's one of the questions. In my case, now I have a listing in Malibu, and I just had to do an MT, a modification of terms, right? Because the listing was signed already earlier before this took place, which went into effect. This new settlement went into effect August 17th, 2024. So I had to do a modification of terms that my seller is giving me the permission to disclose that the seller is willing to offer concessions or a buyer agent compensation. Now, the seller may disclose to me what amount that is, but I am not supposed to tell the buyer agent what that amount is. So in other words, if they call, right? Because that's not in the best interest of my seller. And the reason being is, for example, let's say a buyer calls me up and said, hey, is your listing still available? Yes, it is. Can we see it tomorrow? Yes, you can see it tomorrow at 2 p.m., whatever. And by the way, does your seller offer buyer agent compensation? I would say, well, the seller is considering offering compensation for the buyer's agent. Well, how much? I said, well, I can't tell you that. So here's the thing. Why don't you just write an offer and incorporate or add your request for commission into it, and then we'll look at the offer and counter back and go that route. Because on the BRBC, there is a specific amount, let's say 2.5%, right? So the buyer, you and I, if you're my buyer, we would agree on a commission. Now, if the seller pays 1%, right, and offers 1%, so then now the buyer would only be liable for another 1.5%. So it's not like you can collect. Let's say the seller offers 2.5 and the buyer agreement is 2.5. I cannot collect 5. I can only collect what's in that BRBC, depending who pays for it. It's a little bit complicated, I know, but that's basically how the gist of it, right? So that's going to be interesting. But on behalf of that, I'd like you to watch a video really quick, which is our CEO from eXp, my brokerage, was interviewed by a news agency about that particular subject. And I'd like you to see this really quick.
Hi, contestant. Yeah, this is a landmark antitrust settlement in the housing market that'll fundamentally change the way real estate agents are compensated when you buy or sell your home. The National Association of Realtors agreed to take offers of broker compensation off the MLS, which is their listing database. In addition, buyers will have to sign agreements of compensation with their agents. In the past, both buyer and seller agent commissions were usually paid by the seller. Now, to help us better understand all of this, we're joined by the CEO of EXP, one of the largest real estate brokerages in the nation, Leo Pareja. Thanks so much for joining us. I know you just took the reins of the company last spring, so you're right in the fire, but let's get right to it. For the consumer, is this going to lower commissions overall, make them more negotiable, or just split up who pays them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what consumers need to focus on, it'll really change the process. So the 23 years I've been a licensed broker, the buy side was somewhat informal in the sense you met somebody in an open house, you had chemistry, they helped you buy the house. Now there's got to be an agreement signed and executed prior to touring homes. And so there is going to be a departure from the way things were done. And I'm calling it the messy middle because it's going to be both for consumers as well as agents, getting used to the new process. So we've already had anecdotal stories where a consumer calls an agent, the agent presents the contract, and they call a parent or a friend or someone who's bought a home before and says, that's not how it goes. So I'm asking everyone to have quite a bit of grace as we maneuver these new rules. And sellers need to be aware that now when they list a home with an agent, they will have the option to still offer a buyer a compensation fee like they did in the past off the MLS, or they can simply say, put it in the contract and it can become negotiable. So there's going to be an adjustment period. But as you said, Diana, it's a lot of who's going to pay whom is negotiable on every transaction.
And there's been confusion, I know, as you talked about. I talked to a lot of real estate agents, in fact, some today, who say that things don't look like they're shaping up the way they should on the MLS right now. But for them, there's this concern that if someone's paying a buyer agent, not paying a buyer agent, and the buyer agents can't get compensation, that this will cause a lot of agents to leave the business. Do you see that?
I don't see that. So one thing to unpack there is this rule was the result of a legal settlement. That doesn't change an iota of what the value of an agent brings to the table. The average buyer agent in America takes about 100 hours representing a party, and that is not going to change. The listing side is still as intense for the consumers, both the agents in consummating the transaction. So I think there's going to be a lot more conversations about compensation. You know, we're all for transparency, so the more transparency that could be a part of the transaction, the better. But the amount of effort and representation won't change. I'm mostly telling agents to think about the buyers like the sellers. You will now need to do a presentation. There will be a competitive market. You could see a flurry of new businesses start up, as we've seen on the listing side for decades, where there are companies that do it for a flat fee, there are companies that do it for a menu of services, and there are full service companies that do it for a percentage. I fully expect to see folks do that on the buy side as well. But the fact that buying a home is the single largest investment the average American family makes. It's done probably an average of 3 times, and it's highly complex with a lot of friction. And on the seller side, where sellers have had the optionality to go for sale by owner or use different business models, consumers choose at very high rates, 80 to 90% of the time, professional representation. And I don't think that's going to change because we have rules set.
And there's been this claim that it could actually lower home prices. That is because if the seller doesn't have to pay the buyer agent commission, and say on a $500,000 house, they would have been paying $30,000 in commission. Now they're only paying $15,000, that they might take that $15,000 off the sale price of the house, as in lower home prices. Do you think that's going to happen?
I think that's categorically false. I think the value of a home is dictated by the supply of properties, the demand from buyers, and the affordability index. As we saw interest rates retreat by about 1%, that'll bring some reprieve to buyers on the sidelines. But really, we have a fundamental lack of inventory in this country that comes from the financial crisis, where we didn't build enough homes for the financial household formation we've experienced. And sellers were always trying to execute the highest net to them in the shortest amount of time possible. And the buyers are always trying to get the best deal possible for the home that fits their family needs.
So this is very interesting. It's an interesting point, and I'm going to show you another video also of Jason Mitchell, because there was a point where NAR was considering not to allow sellers to offer compensation, but they have retracted from that since then. So that was something I heard. I don't know if that's absolutely true, but that's what I heard. But anyway, I want you to see this video real quick, because it's interesting. He says 100 hours is what an agent usually takes to represent a buyer in a transaction. Maybe now it's a few hours more because we have more paperwork, because it's definitely have become more complex, and still remains to be seen, actually. if this is going to be the trend going forward, because sellers always had the option not to pay a buyer's agent, because when you have the residential listing agreement, you agree on a total commission, and you could opt out and say, okay, I only want to sell, I only want to pay the agent this and this much, right? Or nothing at all. And but here's the thing. So I heard from an agent in Washington State that in 2019, they did also just that, where the seller started not offering a buyer agent compensation. Well, what has happened there is that 80 or 90% went back to the traditional way, because they found out that they cut off a large chunk of the buyer pool. So what I mean by that is a seller agent, a listing agent, with the help of social media, their marketing plan, open house, they bring a certain amount of buyers, potential buyers, to the property to be seen, right? When you pay a buyer agent fee, then you have buyer agents bringing in another amount of, I don't know if it's 50, 40, 60% of the buyer pool, but now you're cutting that out, right? So now you have less offers. You might only have one offer instead of 5, 6, or 10 offers on your house, or multiple offers. So you might actually sell for less. So the interesting thing to be seen in the future, how that turns out, is because you might be saving $30,000 going in by not paying a BAC, buyer agent compensation. But what if you sell for less, So this is a very interesting point. We have to yet see how that works out. But have a look at what Jason Mitchell is saying here. This is also another interesting video, which I think is very interesting. So let's have a look at this real quick.
Best interest of consumers to do so, period. You gotta encourage cooperative compensation. And those that aren't offering cooperative compensation, we need to find ways to look at those agents through a different light. Why? Why are you doing this? Because here's the deal. And I can say that and kind of shunning them because I know they wouldn't have done it before. Well, if you wouldn't have done it before, why would you do it now? Because all you're doing is you're devastating the real estate market, and you're also hurting potential home buyers. There's no benefit to not offering cooperative compensation. And by the way, if I'm selling my home, I can pay whoever if I'm selling this wallet and you bring me a buyer and I say, I want to sell my wallet for $200, and if you bring me a buyer, I'll give you $20. Who's to say anybody that we can't? That's up for me to decide, not NAR. Who are you to tell me as a seller of the asset that I own that I can't offer something to somebody? That's just garbage. And I'll tell you what, as somebody in the business, if I was selling my home, I would still offer a 2.5% co-broke to sell my home, because I know if I don't, I'm going to lose out on buyers who now, I mean, even before, if I listed my home at 1%, agents would say, well, dude, this is where the buyer broker agreement becomes so important. You're going to pay for services rendered up to a certain amount. Now that's negotiable. That's up to you and your buyer, whatever you negotiate. But if the cooperative compensation doesn't equate to that, you got to make up the difference. In the cases where there's no cooperative compensation, you're going to have to make up the full difference. Well, tell me why, if that's the case, knowing that no buyer ever wants to pay for this out of their own pocket, why would you encourage a seller to put them in a worse position? So we need the agents in our lending community to take the pledge and encourage. You need to encourage cooperative compensation when you sell a home. It allows for home ownership. That's the key. I know a lot of lenders that try to open up their own brokerage, and what they found is it's very difficult because you need boots on the ground in every local market. And in order to do that, what service level do you provide? Like, if all I got to do is write a contract for you as a buyer and represent you on paper, maybe you do that for a point. But what people don't understand is you may have to tour somebody 6, 7 times before they actually buy a house. You know how many hours that's spent doing? So if we're clocked by attorneys at $300 an hour, $400 an hour, whatever it is, how do you really tally that up? Do you tally that up when I would, hey Dave, here's a bill for $13,000. When I get a bill from my attorney, I don't care what attorney it is, I'm like, how in the hell did you get to this amount? What do you charge? I was looking at properties for you last night for 2 hours. You were? Yeah. Okay. But I don't like that world. It's too non-transparent, right? I don't like that world. I think percentage based on the asset is always the way to do it, because no one can ever tell you definitively how much time you spent on something. And I just don't see us being, we're in a service industry for consumers, but we're selling assets. Lawyers are selling service. Those are two different things. And by the way, when you talk about selling expensive assets, the real estate community is about as low of a commission that you can pay. Dave, if you have expensive art and you sell that art and you take it to Sotheby's, they're going to charge you 10 to 12%. You take it to Christie's, they're going to charge you 10, 12%. Dave, if you take your car and you put it in Barrett-Jackson, they're going to charge you 10%. If you sell a commercial building, they're going to charge you 7 to 8%. We're on average 5% for both sides, around 2.6% per side. So we're already one of the lowest priced asset-based commissionable industries that there is, but yet it's too expensive. Home ownership isn't too expensive because the cost of sale or the cost of the service. Home ownership is too expensive because the government printed $3 trillion in 2020, artificially lowered rates so everybody bought homes, which hijacked the pricing of homes, which now everyone was flush with cash, don't want to sell their homes now because they're in a 3% rate and they don't want to go into a 7% rate, and everyone's flush with cash, so inflation took off, so you had to jack the federal funds rate up. So now home prices are up 40% in some areas and a rate 7%. That's the problem with housing. The problem with housing isn't real estate commissions, and it ain't lender costs. Hell, you can't get any less lender costs. There's no margin in loans anymore. The problem with housing is what the government already did with housing, and that is they printed a ton of money during COVID and then lowered rates where everyone bought homes that doesn't want to release those homes into the market because they don't want to give up that rate. And inflation went through the roof because they printed all this money. That's why we're in a jam. And we can't lower and I think that the Fed is doing the right thing. They're monitoring inflation so much because they know we can't just cut rates recklessly because inflation will once again be out of control, which it was for 3 years. So we got into this position because, quite frankly, again, I think the Fed's doing the right thing by monitoring this very closely. But there was just some bad monetary policy that put us in this position. It has nothing to do with the cost of sale. And all that comes from anyways the seller proceeds. So what? I sell my home for $500,000. I got to pay somebody $12,500 to help me sell my asset. What does that have to do with anything? Nothing.
Yeah, he's got a good point there, So the real estate commission is not really what some people say, oh, this is why the prices are high and whatever. It has nothing to do with that, really. And also real estate commission, some people think, oh, realtors make so much money. You have to remember, real estate commissions are shared with the broker, sometimes 50%, 50-50, 60-40, whatever the split is. You have to pay for marketing, you have to pay for transaction coordinators. So there's a lot of expenses going on with it. But it's interesting. Let's look at the inventory real quick because you will see what he's talking about when the Feds printed so much money, how that affected the inventory in 2020. So here's the weekly available inventory from Altus Research. This is U.S. single-family residences only. This does not include townhouses and condominiums. It's 41% greater than last year, which is true. So here's the thing. Look at that. So 2023, we were about here, so about 580, 590,000. Now we have 693,000 units for sale on the market right now. That is an increase, but also you have to remember there is a bottleneck going on, right? So yes, there's listings coming because sellers, like he said, sellers are waiting. They have been waiting, for the rates to drop because sellers during COVID got a 3% interest rate or mortgage rate for their property. They don't want to leave that and move into 7%. I mean, that would be insane. It wouldn't make sense. However, there is a point where sellers can no longer wait because they have to relocate to whatever, East Coast for jobs, for family reasons. There's a bunch of different reasons. So at some points they cannot wait any longer. But going back to the inventory, have a look real quick, and so that would be the reason why this has gone up, but sales have slowed down a bit. Now let's look at the months of inventory, right? So a healthy inventory level would be 6 to 7 months supply. California is 2.1, Texas 3.8, Florida is 3.6. Nowhere on this map is anywhere near a 6 or 7%. That's another reason why prices are staying up, because there is real low inventory. Now let's check this out here real quick. This is total inventory of all the units. This is including single-family residences, townhouses, condominiums. So all housing units available on the market right now is 884,273. That is crazy low. If you look here at 2017 January, we had 1.4 million units. This is a healthy market. Like 1.4 to 1.6 or 1.8 million would be a healthy market, a healthy supply of inventory. That hasn't happened. And if you look here, what Jason was talking about in 2020, government printed $3 trillion, lowered the rates, and guess what happened? People started going crazy and gobbled up the inventory all the way down in 2022 to 354,016 units, right? That was how homes would sell within days or hours even, and you had multiple offers. It was just crazy. People overpaid. It was really an insane situation. Let's go back to what we're going to talk about here. Okay, yeah, so homeowner safety tip. This is something that's really important, I think, and I think people should consider that. I have a couple of clients who did that. Just show you the video really quick. What it is it's a shut-off valve. When there's a leak detected in your house, it shuts off the main water supply. So let's just go back to that.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we're installing a very important device to your main water shut-off line. This is called the Bulldog Smart Life Instructions to install. And this, what it is it has sensors that when this is a wet paper towel here. So when I put this sensor in the areas like there's the washer, bathroom, wherever there could be a leak, the moment it detects water, look what happens. It shuts off your water immediately. I have installed in your house or townhouse or wherever you have a main shut-off valve.
Quick. I installed it here.
Hey guys, today I want to talk about something. Anybody who owns a home or a condominium or town with the way insurance are handling it. So if you look up here, you cannot have the round shut-off valve. You have to have a lever, right? So let me demonstrate real quick. We had a case in Bel Air. Not good news. I think the whole room is flooded. I just got in. I'm actually stepping in the water. Oh shit, everything is underwater. Oh God.
So you can see this could have been prevented, obviously, if you had one of these units installed. I installed it in my place. It's fairly easy to install. It's $325. I have no affiliation with it. I just researched this unit. The unique thing about it is the sensors last about 5 years, the batteries, according to the manufacturer. Now, if you live in a hot area like Arizona and it's outside, I would probably check the batteries every year or two, because if the batteries don't work, this unit won't work. The other neat thing is about this situation is that a lot of people, when they go on vacation, don't turn off the water, right? So now you're setting yourself up for a risk. If you're on the road, you said, oh, I forgot to turn off the water. With this phone on the app, you can actually turn off the water, which I think is great. You can also create a schedule. So Monday from 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. it turns off, but the key ingredient here is, the key point is that you don't want to have a flood. Like you saw this in Bel Air. This was going on all night. We had to call the restoration company. The restoration company alone was about $20,000 just to come in, stop the leak, open up the walls, air everything up, put the fans in there. You're dealing with the mold, you're dealing with reconstruction, you're dealing with insurance. The insurance may cover you, but the insurance also may cancel you, because now you're being seen as a high risk. And then good luck getting insurance after you've been canceled. As you know, homeowners insurance have gone up, skyrocket. The rates have skyrocketed, and they're very selective, and some companies have left California altogether and no longer offer insurance. So you don't want to go that route. I think this unit for $325 is well worth it. I installed it. My neighbor, actually, in my townhouse here, he had about 2-3 months ago, he's sitting at home on a Sunday, and luckily it was a Sunday. He heard this swooshing sound, and one of his hoses on his bathroom container, the toilet water, right, bursted, and water spraying all over the place. Now, if he would have not been home on a Monday, this was happened on a Monday, it would have been disastrous, right? He stopped it right away, but we all installed this, and this is never going to happen again. So I highly recommend that. Really quickly, let's see what else I want to talk about. So it's interesting. They're talking about agent leaving possibly because of this new lawsuit and our settlement. I'm not so sure if they're leaving, but what will happen, I think, is what has to happen now is because buyer's agent up until now were benefiting from the negotiation skills of the listing agent, right? So what I mean by that is a buyer agent never really had to present their value of their services to their client. In a listing appointment, you do. If you're lucky enough to get an appointment, then you have 20 minutes time to convince this total stranger to trust you with one of the biggest assets, selling their homes. And so when you're in a listing appointment, you negotiate and display your value, what you bring to the table, what value it would be to represent the client in the sale of their property. So let's say you agreed on 6%. Now the buyer agent just basically comes in and enjoys the 3% that the seller agent negotiated. So from this going forward, the buyer agent will also have to do a similar situation like a listing appointment where they show their value, and that could maybe eliminate some people. They don't want to do that because I don't know if there's more buyer agent or seller agent in the industry, but that could be something, right? But really quickly, another thing I want to show you really quick is the, before we leave, we're going to wrap it up here in a second, is the listing I have in Malibu, which is really something you guys should see. So if you go to Schaedlerrealtor.com or Schaedlerrealestate.com, either way you get to the website, you go to properties here, and then you will see the property we have here. This is the property is listed at 4.4. You can go on here. You can see a video of it, but you can also go in here where you see more info about it. And look at it. The views are just spectacular. Every single room in this house has ocean view, and the ocean views are just spectacular. It's really a gem of a property. And we just had a price improvement. Look here, there's Sunday morning in the background. I mean, the views at nighttime are spectacular. You can also see sunsets and sunrises. The way this house is situated, you can see on certain times of the year the sunrises on the east and the sunset. So that's really spectacular. The seller has bought another place and is moving out soon, so this has become available. So if you have any questions about it, please let me know. My number is on the bottom of the screen, I think. There it is. And in the meantime, again, call me at 310-918-2260. If you could also do me a favor and give me some comments, what you think about this video, the content of this video, about the settlement. If you have any input, agents or clients, I always appreciate interaction. And in the meantime, I want to say thank you so much for watching this video and taking the time to watch this, and I'll see you next time.